"Step aside. You don't belong here." The words cut through the silence of the night like a blade. They weren't meant for Samuel Reed, but he heard them echo in his head all the same. For nearly 2 decades, he had been the janitor no one noticed, the man who swept the floors of Empire Financial Tower long after its polished executives had gone home. But tonight was different. At 2:47 a.m., the building was supposed to be asleep. The marble lobby gleamed under fluorescent light, the steady hum of the air conditioning filling the empty halls. Samuel moved like a shadow, mop in hand, when something caught his eye. Up on the 40th floor, behind the tinted glass of the executive boardroom, a figure collapsed across the table. It was Evelyn Grant. Her face, the same face that appeared on magazine covers and financial news networks, was twisted in pain. One arm dangled uselessly at her side, and when she reached for her phone, her words came out garbled, broken, almost unrecognizable. Samuel froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew those signs. He had seen them before. A stroke. Marion's voice rushed back to him like a ghost. "Sam, never ignore slurred words, a drooping face, or a weak arm. Those minutes can be the difference between life and death." His late wife, a neurology nurse, had drilled that lesson into him during countless dinner table conversations. She was gone now, but her lessons lived inside him, carved deeper than any scar. For 1 second, Samuel hesitated. What was he supposed to do? He was just the janitor. People like him didn't burst into boardrooms and give orders to CEOs. People like him stayed invisible. But as he stared through the glass at Evelyn Grant, one of the most powerful women in the country, he didn't see a billionaire. He saw a patient in desperate need of help. With a steadying breath, he pushed the door open. "Ms. Grant," he said firmly, his voice carrying a calm authority he hadn't years, "you're having a stroke. Don't try to talk, just listen to me." Her eyes widened, panic flashing as she struggled to form words. Samuel dialed 911, speaking with a precision that startled even the operator. Female, mid-40s, sudden facial paralysis, weakness in the left arm. Speech slurred. Symptoms began less than 10 minutes ago. His tone was steady, clinical, the voice of a man who knew exactly what he was looking at. By the time the paramedics arrived, Evelyn was positioned correctly to minimize damage. Samuel gave a full account of her symptoms, the timeline, the progression. One of the medics looked at him in surprise and whispered, "This janitor knows more than most nurses." But Samuel didn't stay for gratitude. When Evelyn was rushed out on a stretcher, he simply picked up his mop again and returned to the empty hallways. That was who he was, the man in the background, invisible, replaceable, forgettable. Or so he thought. Because what Samuel didn't know was that this night would not disappear into silence. It was the beginning of something far larger than a medical emergency. It was the spark that would unravel hidden truths, expose a conspiracy at the very top, and force the world to see a man it had ignored for far too long. And by morning, Samuel Reed would realize that saving Evelyn Grant's life had just placed his own in greater danger than he could imagine.
The locker room was empty, except for the soft buzz of a fluorescent light that flickered overhead. Samuel set his mop against the wall, reached for his locker, and froze. A crisp envelope was taped to the metal door, his name typed neatly across the front. He tore it open with calloused fingers. Formal warning. Unauthorized use of executive facilities, violation of company protocol. Further infractions may result in termination. At the bottom was a signature he knew too well. Victor Cole, Chief of Security. Samuel let out a dry laugh. After 18 years of spotless service, 18 years of scrubbing marble floors and polishing chrome railings, this was his reward for saving the life of the woman whose portrait hung in the lobby. A punishment for being in the wrong place at the right time. But beneath the sarcasm, a chill settled in his chest. How had Cole known so quickly? Medical emergencies were supposed to be confidential. Paramedics wouldn't have reported to corporate security. Someone, somewhere, was watching Evelyn Grant far more closely than they should have been. The morning sun bled through the glass facade of Empire Financial Tower, painting golden streaks across the lobby. The scent of roasted coffee drifted from the cafe downstairs, mingling with the faint bite of disinfectant. Executives in tailored suits clicked past Samuel without a glance, their polished shoes tapping sharp rhythms against the marble floor. This was his world, unseen, unacknowledged. To them, Samuel was part of the furniture, someone who existed only when a trash bin overflowed or a spill needed mopping. And yet, as he passed the 40th floor that day, he caught sight of something that made his stomach knot. Behind the smoked glass doors of Evelyn's office, Dr. Nathan Harlow, her personal physician, stood in a heated discussion with Victor Cole. Harlow's normally smooth, confident face looked unsettled, almost nervous. Cole, on the other hand, wore the tight-lipped grin of a man who thrived on control. Samuel couldn't hear the words, but the body language told its own story. Pointed fingers, stiff shoulders, eyes darting toward the hallway as if worried about being observed. It wasn't the first time Samuel had felt the sting of injustice inside these walls. He remembered the countless nights when executives brushed past him as if he were invisible, their conversations dropping in volume the moment they noticed his uniform. He remembered the time an intern, barely out of college, had shoved his coffee cup at him without a word, mistaking him for a servant. Through it all, Samuel kept his dignity. Marion used to say that dignity is like oxygen, he thought, invisible, but you die without it. That memory stung. Marion had been gone 5 years, but the lessons she'd left behind lingered in every corner of his mind. She had taught him how to spot the early signs of neurological distress, yes, but more importantly, she had taught him that no human life was small, not hers, not his, not even the people who ignored him daily. Later that afternoon, Samuel's suspicions deepened. While cleaning near the executive wing, he noticed Evelyn's assistant retrieving a small brown bottle from Dr. Harlow's briefcase. She handed it to Evelyn with the kind of casual routine that suggested this had happened many times before. But Samuel's eyes caught the label. The dosage was odd, the marking slightly off. It didn't look like any standard vitamin bottle he'd ever seen. He said nothing, but the sight gnawed at him, echoing Marion's words. If something doesn't add up in medicine, Sam, there's always a reason. By nightfall, the city outside glowed with neon light, a hum of traffic carrying through the glass walls. Samuel pushed his cart through the deserted 40th floor, each squeak of the wheels echoing louder than usual. He paused outside Evelyn's office, staring at the mahogany table where she had collapsed the night before. She had survived, but the game around her was only beginning. He could feel it. And Samuel knew one truth better than anyone else in this building. Invisible men see everything. The days that followed were anything but ordinary. Samuel felt the shift in the air each time he wheeled his cleaning cart down the executive corridor. Victor Cole's smirk seemed sharper, his presence heavier, like a shadow that refused to leave. Dr. Harlow moved with the uneasy precision of someone juggling too many secrets. It began with whispers. One morning, as Samuel polished the brass handles outside the conference room, he overheard 2 junior analysts talking in hushed tones. "Cole says the janitor's been snooping around," one of them muttered. "He should be grateful he even has a job here." The other chuckled nervously, lowering his voice. "They'll find a way to get rid of him. You don't cross people like that." Samuel kept wiping the handle, his face expressionless, but inside a storm brewed. He had done nothing but save a life, yet already the story was being twisted into something darker. By midweek, the pressure grew more deliberate. A memo appeared on the staff board. All non-executive personnel restricted from executive floors unless supervised. It was signed, of course, by Victor Cole. Everyone knew who the real target was. That night, Samuel entered the locker room to find his uniform scattered across the floor, soaked with coffee. A note was pinned to the sleeve. "Stay in your place." He picked it up calmly, folded the ruined fabric, and placed it back into his locker. Years of silent nights had taught him that sometimes the loudest response was no response at all. But behind his steady eyes, something hardened. The following evening, the confrontation turned face to face. Cole cornered him near the freight elevator, his broad frame blocking the exit. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Cole's voice was low, sharp. "You made us look weak, Reed. That's not a smart move." Samuel met his gaze without flinching. "I made sure a woman got to the hospital in time. That's all." Cole leaned closer, the fluorescent lights casting harsh lines across his face. "People who don't know their place don't last long here. Keep mopping floors. Stay out of things you don't understand." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Samuel pushed his cart forward, gently but firmly, making Cole step aside. 18 years in this building," he said evenly, "and I understand more than you think." But the attacks didn't stop. The next morning, Evelyn's assistant accidentally spilled hot coffee across the floor Samuel had just finished polishing, smirking as she walked away without a word. 2 security officers searched his cart during lunch break, claiming random inspection. Even the cafeteria cashier gave him a long look before refusing to honor his employee discount. It was as if the building itself had turned against him. And yet, through each slight, Samuel remained steady. He remembered Marion's words. "Dignity isn't loud, Sam. It's quiet. It stands when others want you to bow." So, he stood. Still, beneath his calm exterior, Samuel observed everything. He noticed the way Dr. Harlow lingered in Cole's office longer than usual, leaving with a briefcase clutched too tightly. He noticed Evelyn's pallor when she returned from those checkups, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her pen. He noticed, too, the growing nervous glances exchanged between Cole and Harlow whenever Samuel passed by, as though his very silence unsettled them. Invisible men see everything. One night, while wiping down the glass wall of the boardroom, Samuel caught Evelyn alone inside, massaging her temples, a brown bottle of pills resting on the table. For a moment, their eyes met through the reflection. She looked away quickly, but not before he saw it, the flicker of doubt, the quiet fear. It confirmed what Samuel already suspected. Something was deeply wrong, and he was the only one who cared enough to notice. And then, just when the walls seemed to be closing in, Samuel found an opening he hadn't expected. It happened late on a Friday evening. The building was nearly empty, the city's neon glow spilling through the tall glass windows as Samuel pushed his cart toward the service elevator. That's when he heard a familiar voice call softly from the shadows. "Sam, hold up." He turned. Standing near the maintenance panel was Luis Ramirez, the building's electrical technician. Younger than Samuel by a decade, Luis carried the kind of quiet toughness that came from years in the army. He had always been respectful, one of the few who spoke to Samuel like a man, not just a uniform. Luis stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know what they're doing to you, and I know you're not wrong about Cole." Samuel studied him carefully. Trust was dangerous in this place. "What do you mean?" Luis glanced around, then pulled a small device from his pocket, a miniature recorder. "I've been working these ducts long enough to hear things I wasn't supposed to. Cole and Dr. Harlow, they're not just talking about stress tests, they're planning something bigger, something that involves Miss Grant's health and stocks." For a moment, Samuel felt the air leave his lungs. It was one thing to suspect, it was another to hear confirmation. Luis leaned against the wall, his voice steady but urgent. "You saved her once, Sam, but if we don't act, you might not get the chance a second time. I've got access to the wiring, the ventilation shafts, places Cole never checks. We could set up equipment, get proof." Samuel shook his head slowly, half in disbelief. "Why risk yourself, Louise? You've got a family." Louise's jaw tightened. "Because I've seen men like Cole before. In uniform, out of uniform, it doesn't matter. They think power makes them untouchable. But I know better, and I'm not going to stand by while they poison someone and destroy lives." The words hit Samuel harder than he expected. For months he had carried the burden alone, invisible, underestimated. Now, suddenly, he wasn't alone. The next night, as they reviewed blueprints of the executive floor in the dim glow of the break room, Samuel felt a flicker, something he hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Louise traced his finger along the ventilation shafts. Here, here, and here. Perfect spots for audio. No cameras on the weekend, minimal security rounds. I can be in and out in under an hour.
Samuel nodded, his mind racing. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. Marion's lessons, his own years of quiet observation, and now Luis's military precision. Together, they had a chance. But he also knew the danger. "If they find us out," he began. Luis cut him off with a half smile. "Then we make sure they don't. You've been invisible for 18 years, Sam. That's not a weakness. That's our weapon." 2 nights later, Samuel proved just how invisible he could be. While he pushed his cart down the corridor like any other night, Luis crawled silently through the ducts above, placing tiny microphones with the precision of a surgeon. Every squeak of Samuel's mop, every rattle of the wheels, covered the faint sound of tools clicking into place overhead. By the time the shift ended, they had created a listening post that no one in power would suspect. And for the first time since Evelyn's collapse, Samuel felt the tide begin to shift. The janitor and the soldier, 2 men overlooked by the world, were about to step into a fight far bigger than themselves. It didn't take long. Within 3 days of planting the microphones, the trap snapped shut. On a Wednesday evening, Samuel and Louise sat in a dusty maintenance closet, headphones pressed tight as Victor Cole's voice crackled through the receiver. "Dosage needs to be increased," Cole said, calm as if he were discussing inventory, not a human life. Dr. Harlow's voice followed, clipped and nervous. "Too much at once and she won't survive the night. That draws suspicion. We stay gradual. Symptoms look natural, stress-related." Cole chuckled darkly. "Perfect cover. By the time anyone questions it, I'll already be running this company." Luis muted the feed, his jaw tight. "There's your proof." Samuel felt his stomach twist, but his hands stayed steady. Proof wasn't enough, not in a building like this. Cole and Harlow could bury reports, discredit anyone who spoke against them. If justice was to mean anything, the truth had to explode in public, undeniable and humiliating. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The monthly executive board meeting, a grand ritual in the heart of the tower. Evelyn Grant would preside, still recovering, still trusting the very men tightening the noose around her. Cole would sit at her right hand, projecting loyalty. Harlow would stand by with his medical bag, the picture of professionalism. And Samuel? He would be in the room, invisible as ever, pushing his cart to empty trash bins and wipe down tables. But this time, invisibility was his weapon. The morning of the meeting, Samuel slipped a sealed envelope onto Evelyn's stack of documents. Just one line inside, typed in plain black ink. "The pills you take are not vitamins. Check the label. Someone who cares."
He left without a word, returning to his cart as if nothing had happened. From across the room, he saw her open it. He saw her eyes narrow, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her purse. Her expression changed. Not panic, not yet, but a controlled stillness that only someone at the top could master. Cole was too busy presenting financial projections to notice.
2 hours later, Dr. Harlow arrived for his routine consultation. Samuel, watching through a gap in the glass partition, could hear everything through the directional mic Luis had installed in the desk lamp. "Your stress symptoms are improving," Harlow said smoothly. "Keep taking the supplements, and I promise you'll be back to full strength." Evelyn's voice carried an edge. "Funny, because I received a note suggesting these are not supplements at all. Tell me, doctor, what would I find if I sent them for independent testing?" A pause. Then, the faintest tremor in Harlow's voice. "Ms. Grant, there's no need for that. Someone is trying to sabotage your treatment. You shouldn't let rumors interfere with your recovery." "Rumors," Evelyn repeated, her gaze sharp. "Then you won't mind if I test them?" Harlow paled, fumbling for words, but the trap was already closing. That Friday, as the boardroom filled with executives, cameras, and assistants carrying trays of water, Samuel wheeled his cart inside like he had hundreds of times before. He moved quietly, collecting papers from side tables, polishing glasses, ordinary, invisible. But when Evelyn called the meeting to order, Samuel left something unusual behind, a black briefcase resting on the edge of her desk. She glanced at him, surprised, but he only bowed his head slightly and left the room. Inside that case was everything: recordings, transcripts, forged medical reports, even stock records Luis's military contacts had analyzed with forensic precision. "Gentlemen," Evelyn began, her voice steady as she opened the briefcase, "before we review quarterly performance, there is a matter far more urgent." Cole's eyes flicked toward the case, his jaw tightening. "Madam Chair, if this is a private matter, perhaps—" "It concerns this board," Evelyn cut him off sharply. "It concerns my health and the integrity of this company." She pressed a button on the small speaker Luis had hidden inside. Cole's own voice filled the room. "Dosage needs to be increased. By the next quarter, she'll be out of the board entirely." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Harlow's voice. "Symptoms look natural, stress-related." Gasps rippled through the room. Executives exchanged stunned looks, whispers rising like waves in a storm. Evelyn didn't flinch. She locked her gaze on Cole. "Would you care to explain?" Cole rose from his chair, his smile brittle. "This is absurd, fabricated, clearly someone's idea of a prank." "Fabricated?" Evelyn's tone sharpened. "Because these transcripts match precisely with recordings verified by external analysts. And these," she pulled out the medical documents, "show falsified results signed by Dr. Nathan Harlow himself." All eyes turned to the doctor, whose hands shook visibly. Cole slammed a fist on the table. "This is slander. From whom? From a janitor?" And that was the moment Samuel stepped forward. He hadn't planned to speak, but the words came anyway, steady and unshakable. "Yes, from a janitor." Every head turned. For the first time in 18 years, they truly saw him. "I may not wear a suit," Samuel continued, his voice low but resonant, "but I know what I saw. I know what I heard, and I know the difference between healing and harming. You thought I was invisible, but invisibility sees everything."
The doors to the boardroom opened, and in walked federal agents, summoned by Evelyn hours earlier. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled furiously, as reporters, tipped off by Luis, crowded the hallway outside. Cole's face drained of color. Harlow stammered, sweat dripping down his temple.
Generate a standard American English accent for this story. The voice should be from a middle-aged male with a deep, resonant, calm, confident, and warm tone. The reading pace should be 115% faster than normal, yet remain natural and articulate, as if someone is engaging in a direct conversation while storytelling. The voice must convey sincerity, depth, and profound empathy for the historical experiences and struggles of the Black community, expressing both an understanding of pain and an unyielding resilience. When reaching sections that are calls to action, use bold and powerful intonation. Specifically, when describing moments of triumph and overcoming adversity, the voice should become bright and full of pride, highlighting the transformation from vulnerability to strength, clearly conveying a sense of victory and jubilation. Throughout the narrative, the voice must maintain an evocative quality, as if a wise and experienced individual is sharing invaluable lessons. This should create a personal, intimate connection while remaining authoritative and trustworthy. Incorporate meaningful pauses at key points to allow listeners to reflect and fully absorb the message, ensuring they remain engaged from beginning to end. Medical malpractice and financial fraud. You will come with us. Cole tried to protest, his words tumbling over each other. This is a mistake. I built this company's security. Evelyn's reply was icy calm. And you used it to betray us. You'll answer for that. As Cole and Harlow were escorted out in handcuffs, Samuel stood quietly at the back, mop in hand, heart pounding but steady. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. But in that moment, he knew Marion would have been proud, because the invisible man had just pulled the world into the light. The fallout was immediate. By dawn, the headlines were everywhere. Janitor exposes corporate conspiracy. Security chief and physician arrested in plot against CEO. The story spread across television screens, radio broadcasts, and the front pages of newspapers nationwide. Victor Cole, once the untouchable guardian of the tower, now faced a long list of charges: fraud, conspiracy, medical malpractice, attempted endangerment. Dr. Nathan Harlow, stripped of his license, was led from his office in disgrace. The very men who had strutted through the building with arrogance were now reduced to footnotes in a scandal that would follow them for the rest of their lives. For the first time in years, Samuel felt the balance shift. The men who had tried to silence him had been silenced themselves. Evelyn Grant acted swiftly. Within 24 hours, she called a press conference on the steps of Empire Financial Tower. Cameras crowded the plaza as she stood before the microphones, pale but resolute. I owe my life, and this company owes its integrity to a man most of us overlooked for far too long, she began, her voice carrying across the crowd. Samuel Reed not only saved me in a moment of crisis, but he uncovered a conspiracy that would have destroyed this company from within. Competence, integrity, and courage do not depend on titles or tailored suits. They live in the character of those who choose to act. The applause that followed was thunderous. For Samuel, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd, it was almost overwhelming. After 18 years of invisibility, he was suddenly the center of the story. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She turned toward him, gesturing for him to join her at the podium. Reluctantly, Samuel stepped forward, the flash of cameras nearly blinding.
Effective immediately, Evelyn announced, Samuel Reed will serve as Director of Corporate Safety and Integrity for Empire Financial. His knowledge, vigilance, and character are exactly what this company needs to ensure that such corruption never takes root here again. Gasps rippled through the press corps. A janitor turned director, it was unthinkable. And yet, as Samuel shook Evelyn's hand, the crowd erupted once more. In the weeks that followed, Samuel's life changed in ways he never could have imagined. Instead of pushing a mop through empty corridors, he now sat at a desk with a panoramic view of the skyline. He led a team of investigators tasked with rooting out fraud and abuse, using the same sharp eyes that had once scanned hallways for dust. Luis Ramirez, true to Evelyn's promise, was promoted to head of electronic security, his expertise finally recognized. Together, he and Samuel built systems to ensure that corruption like Cole's could never thrive unnoticed again. But Samuel's proudest moment came not in the office, but in the unveiling of the Marion Reed Scholarship Program. With funding from Evelyn and Empire Financial, the program offered full scholarships to low-income students pursuing careers in neurology and emergency medicine.
As he stood before the first group of recipients, young men and women whose parents worked as cleaners, drivers, and security guards, Samuel felt a lump in his throat. These students would carry Marion's legacy forward, turning her lessons into lives saved. Meanwhile, justice moved swiftly against those who had nearly destroyed everything. Cole was sentenced to federal prison, his wealth seized to repay those harmed by his manipulations. His swagger vanished behind steel bars, where power meant nothing. Dr. Harlow, disgraced and unlicensed, faced years of legal battles, his once proud name now synonymous with betrayal. For Samuel, there was no need for revenge. Seeing them face the weight of justice was enough. One crisp autumn morning, Samuel walked the familiar halls of the tower, no longer with a mop, but with the authority of a leader. Employees who once looked through him now greeted him with respect. Some even stopped to thank him quietly, admitting that his story had given them courage to speak up in their own lives. He paused at the window, gazing out at the city bathed in golden light. For 18 years, he had been invisible. Now, not only was he seen, he had become a symbol of integrity. And yet, he knew the real victory wasn't his promotion or the headlines. It was the quiet truth Marion had always believed. Dignity, knowledge, and courage could change the course of lives, sometimes even the course of an entire company. Months later, the story of Samuel Reed no longer belonged only to Empire Financial Tower. It had traveled far beyond those glass walls, carried in headlines, documentaries, and whispered conversations in break rooms across the country. Letters poured in, hundreds of them, from janitors, nurses, bus drivers, and clerks. Each one carried the same refrain: if Samuel Reed could stand up and be heard, maybe I can too. But Samuel never thought of himself as a hero. He thought of himself as a husband, keeping a promise to Marion, as a worker who chose to see what others ignored. Every morning, he paused at his new office before sitting at his desk. On the corner stood a silver picture frame with Marion's photograph inside. Her smile was soft, timeless, as if she were still reminding him of the lessons she'd whispered at their kitchen table years ago. One evening after a long day, he touched the frame and murmured, "We did it, Marion. We finally did it." The scholarship program in her name had already funded dozens of young students, many from families who had never dared to imagine their children could wear a white coat. Each time Samuel met those students, their eyes bright with hope, he felt the invisible become visible all over again. Even Evelyn admitted, during one of their private meetings, "You've changed more than just this company, Sam. You've changed the way people think about who matters and what integrity really looks like."
Samuel only smiled. "I just did what anyone should do. Look, listen, and act when it counts."
What began as a single act of courage had rippled outward into something larger than he ever imagined. Corporate reform spread, new systems were adopted, and conversations about integrity filled boardrooms across the country. But the most powerful change could not be measured in policies or profits. It was the quiet empowerment of ordinary people realizing that they too could make a difference. One crisp winter morning, as Samuel walked through the lobby of the tower he had once cleaned unnoticed, he caught sight of a janitor pushing a cart past the revolving doors. The young man looked tired, his shoulders heavy. Samuel stopped, offered a nod, and said simply, "Your work matters." The young man blinked in surprise, then smiled faintly, as though those words alone lightened the weight he carried. And that was the truth of Samuel Reed's journey. That justice, when it comes, is not only about punishment, it is about transformation. That true intelligence is not confined to diplomas, nor is dignity confined to titles. That courage is often quiet, steady, and unseen until the moment it must shine. Samuel had once been invisible, but now he stood as a living reminder that no one is truly unseen when they carry integrity in their heart. Because in the end, the greatest legacy is not recognition or reward, it is the proof that even the smallest light can break the darkest shadow. At its heart, Samuel Reed's story reminds us of a timeless truth. Dignity and courage are not defined by titles, wealth, or status, but by the choices we make when no one is watching. For 18 years, Samuel lived in the shadows, invisible to those around him. Yet it was his quiet persistence, his willingness to observe, and his refusal to ignore what was wrong that turned him from an overlooked janitor into a symbol of integrity. As the saying goes, character is what you do when no one is looking. And Samuel proved that character, not power, is the foundation of justice. This lesson is not only about one man standing against corruption. It is about all of us. We may not face boardroom conspiracies, but we each face moments when we must decide whether to stay silent or to speak, whether to accept injustice or to gently but firmly resist it. The truth is, harmful silence can be just as dangerous as the wrongdoing itself. By choosing to act with honesty and courage, even in small ways, we remind ourselves and those around us that every person has worth. So what about you? Have you ever felt invisible or underestimated, only to find strength you didn't know you had? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice may encourage someone else who feels unseen today. And if this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that both inspire and challenge us to look deeper into the meaning of justice, dignity, and compassion. Wishing you peace and strength as you carry these lessons into your own journey. May you always remember, even the quietest light can guide someone through the darkest night.